let's understand how is the business environment in Canada looks like. If we have to talk about how business friendly is it for companies to do business in Canada.
Well, there are a few clear advantages of doing business with Canada. The production costs, business costs, are absolutely minimum. For the last at least 10 years, Canada, specifically Ontario, has been ranked the world's one of the best places to do business with. And this is primarily because the taxes are friendly for businesses. The human resources are great. They have a very good skilled labor. There's a very positive business climate. You have seamless access to Europe as well as to the entire NAFTA area, which would be, I think I lost you. Oh.
No, I'm there.
Okay. The business infrastructure is great. Quality of life is great. So these are the key reasons that people would want to do business with Canada. If you look at the slide, we've given you a brief overview as to why you could choose there. It's minimum regulatory compliances and a government that is absolutely driven to bolster competitiveness, productivity, investment, and innovation. These are the driving forces behind the continued easing of systems. Okay, so if you look at the economy, and if you compare the economy to all the different countries around, you won't hear about a collapse in the Canadian economy, not even when the 2008 crash took place. In fact, Canada was one of the few countries that emerged absolutely unscathed from it. That should actually answer your question. I think I've given more slides. You could probably give those up so people can read them and there's some penetrative value.
Yes, sure. I'll do that. I'll surely do that. So let's understand because one thing is what we have seen is because there is a lot of Indian population in Canada, or people from Indian origin move to Canada and just staying there, having the citizenship, got the citizenship in Canada. So is there a special kind of a relationship with India and Canada from the business aspect as well as the regulatory aspects?
Well, one of the biggest reasons is that Canada has one of the largest Indian diasporas that there is. And I think it is a significant amount of their total population are Indians. Whether you go to Vancouver, whether you go to Toronto, a lot of the businesses, a lot of the professionals, including their legal system professionals, even their sitting MPs are Indians. And so apart from that, it's also the legal system is very similar to that of Canada and India. Both have emerged from the common law system and have federal system as well inculcated, which is what makes it a lot easier to provide advice to Canadian companies as well as Indian companies that wish to go and set up businesses in Canada. And apart from this, if you see in the last maybe 7 years, you will see that there has been increased dialogue between the governments of both countries. So the number of treaties we have signed for cooperation across the field, I mean, one of the most recent ones that we did work on was the Audio-Visual Co-Production Treaty. But even apart from that, if you see the kind of representation that Canada has in India. So I'll just give you a few quick stats. Canada, the bilateral merchandise trade is totaled over 6.3 billion in 2014. Strong personal ties, including 1.2 million Canadians, are persons of Indian origin. That's a significant amount of their population. And if you would know about Canada, Canada doesn't have a large population to begin with, which is also why they really encourage skilled professionals from India to come in and set up base in Canada and work there. India also remains one of Canada's priority markets and is an emerging source of FDI. The two-way FDI between Canada and India totaled approximately 4.4 billion in 2013. This is an Indian FDI into Canada was nearly 3.8 billion. Canada's trade offices are now close to 50 trade commissioners in 8 different locations across India. And out of these, I have seen 4 of the offices come up myself in the last 2 years. Apart from that, both embassies, the one in Canada and the Indian embassy in, the Canadian embassy in India and the Indian embassy in Canada are regularly meeting interacting to understand how further they can develop the sectors, which areas have a lack, where all they can come together and have some kind of cooperation. In fact, we joke about it and we say that Canada, recognizing the importance of India, has increased their resources here to help facilitate business connections to such an extent that there is more representation here in Canada than there is over there itself.
Okay. So, what are the laws related to investment in Canada? Looks like. How is it
The
governed?
laws so you have a couple of bilateral treaties. Some of the more important bilateral treaties would be the ones in science and technology, mining, energy, Canadian International Innovation Program, Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection. This is actually one of the mother treaties, so to say, that we've signed. And then, of course, the Invest in Canada Act. I think it's called the Canadian Investment Act. Under that, most of the investment is done in Canada. They also have a gamut of tax incentives, subsidies, rebates that you can take use of under the Investment Canada Treaty. Apart from that, you have for businesses or for entrepreneurs or for just people who want to go and set up, you have a lot of, say, a startup visa. You have the Scientific and Research Development Index Program. All of these are to assist and facilitate investment in Canada.
Sure. Yeah, please continue. I think you were saying something.
No, I mean, I can go into the incorporation side of things about how the investment really works, but I guess I'll just wait for you to get to there.
Please, yeah. Please, you can continue with let's understand how the process works.
Before that, let me just tell you some of the government measures that have taken place between India and Canada in the last, say, just the last 2015 and 2014. So the Audiovisual Co-Production Treaty was signed in 2014. But apart from that, we have had successful treaties signed in rail transportation, civil aviation, uranium, Saving Brain Initiative, and skill development. As you may know, skill development is one of the key factors of the Modi government even today. And even in India, as well as, say, with UK that they just signed this month, they signed with UK as well, just a treaty to develop skill. Because this is a core mandate of the government today, a lot of the bilateral talks that are taking place and the measures that are being inculcated are based on skill development. Now, the colleges in Canada that exist and have existed for the last few decades, they are very high on skill development, especially in creative fields, especially in manufacturing, and of course, oil and gas. These are all three key industry areas, even in India. So one of the things that the government has been talking about is an exchange program where a lot more students from both countries can study in the other country as part of their last year of their whichever program they choose. Now, this will have a direct impact on, say, the industries that we have in these sectors in India, as well as open up massive doors for students or younger entrepreneurs or even young businesses that want to set up and go to Canada to be able to work in these fields. And this kind of cross communication, exchange of ideas, exchange of skills will, I feel, have a direct impact on investments in both countries as well. So it's just some of the basic government measures. Now, the other thing that is important to know before we go into how to set up a business is the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So in recent years, I've just discussed with you all the various ways in which the governments have tried to promote cross-field cooperation. But the EPA actually goes a little further than that, and it's supposed to be one of the landmark treaties that we will be signing with any country in the foreseeable future. It is to broaden and deepen cooperation in all economic fields, encourage trade and investment flows bilaterally and regionally, improve the business climate in both countries, contribute to trade and investment facilitation through minimizing tariff, and this is the most important thing, minimizing tariff and non-tariff barriers. So, as you would know that in any country that you do investments with, the import and export taxes that you may pay and the tariffs that companies pay to do business with them pose a significant deterrent or encouraging stream for you to choose a particular country. Now, Canada has gone out of its way, and not just with India, with many other nations as well, and which actually helps India as well make use of those relationships if you can set up a branch office in Canada and reduce all your tariff barriers. Apart from this, it also helps reduce a lot of administrative costs. Then lastly, it also enhances transparency of regulation and promotes cooperation amongst all the relevant institutions that you could possibly take subsidies with or avail the programs so that you don't have to pay tax on certain aspects. So now what we've seen is there was a joint scoping report that was released in September 2010, which estimates that the total bilateral trade in goods and services between Canada and India can grow over 50% or almost $3 billion under this CEPA treaty that we have. And Canadian agricultural exports to India have grown from 42% in just in the span that this treaty has been alive. The joint study has concluded that although this agreement has not been absolutely executed between the nations, there is sufficient common ground to recommend moving towards a negotiation of this comprehensive agreement, which would cover substantially all trade in every goods and service that exists, investment, trade facilitation, and all other areas of economic cooperation as a single undertaking. So you won't have to apply under various different treaties, different programs, nothing. Once the CEPA comes into force, all the goods, all your trade will be covered under it.
Okay, thanks for that information. Would like to know more about how to start a business, what will be the steps look like if you have to start a business in Canada.
Okay, so you can start a business, any non-Canadian who can acquire control of an existing Canadian business or who wishes to establish a new unrelated Canadian business are all subject to the Investment Canada Act. And they must either submit a notification of application for review under it, and you have 45 days to. So under Canada, in the Investment Act, what they have done is they have set up these committees. So any non-Canadian who wants to apply, you have to submit an application in a prescribed form, and then the committee takes 45 days, and they can extend that up for another 30 days to respond on your application. Now, if you wish to settle in Canada, then you can also apply as a business immigrant, either in the form of a startup visa, entrepreneur, or as a self-employed person. We'll be discussing the startup visa measure in more detail in a little while because I don't want to confuse the flow of just the business setup bit. If you do not wish to actually move to the country, then you may explore setting up your business through an appropriate entity structure best suited for your purpose with the help of a Canadian citizen or as a landed immigrant holding minimum 25% board representation. Now, the actual business structures that exist are absolutely same as we have in India. So you have your sole proprietorship, you have your joint ventures, you have your limited liability, you have your corporation. So corporation is what we call a private limited company. You have it corporate. There's a step that it takes about a quarter of the time for the registration process to actually go through than it does in India. That is one of your key differences. Now, because Canada follows a federal and provincial system of incorporation as well as of taxes, you can choose to incorporate your company either federally or provincially. Now, the key differences between the two are that under a federal system, once you reserve your name for the corporation, that name remains the same for all provinces. You don't have to specifically go and apply for the name registration. However, if you were to apply under one single province, then if you wanted to expand your business to a different province, you would have to first apply for the name and see if the name is even available. So we normally recommend that even though it's an added cost, it's far easier and smoother for you to just register federally, so that that license is valid for you across the different provinces. Do you want me to go into detail about how to actually
Yes,
set up and incorporate? Okay.
yes, yes. That is what I like is looking for.
Okay. So forming a, no, it's also important to understand the background. So to, to set the flow and to set up the structure for the incorporation. So forming an incorporation in Canada is pretty much the same as forming a company in India. And the key difference I told you is actually in the time. The first step is to choose whether to incorporate provincially or federally. This I've already told you how we are going to do. Business name registration applies to entrepreneurs who want to register a sole proprietorship, partnership, or an operating name for a corporation. You prepare the usual documents, the memorandum and articles of incorporation, details of both offices. So you have 2 offices on record and your registered office. And lastly, the filing of documents, which can be done online or submitted to the registrar with all the forms and fees. It is important to note that as a non-Canadian wanting to open a business, you will also be subject to personal liability if you're a director. So Canadian laws don't give limited liability to directors. You will be open to it. So this is one of the key things that everybody should be a little careful or be aware about before starting off a business. Now, if you're a regulated professional, so it's like a lawyer or a chartered accountant, you may provincially incorporate your practice as a professional corporation. Some of the key features for this are limited liability protection, access to external investment funding, advantages of corporate tax rules, and corporate status. Now, if you incorporate your business federally, you can open locations within any province and territory across Canada without requiring a license to go through. It also provides corporate name protection across the country, vis-a-vis under the provincial system, where you will need to make your separate applications. The process for the application is the same as incorporating a company in each province. So again, you'll have to go through your registration of your name, your memorandum, articles, filing of the forms, filing of your addresses, and filing of the fee. Province also may additionally have its own specific provisions under the different systems in Canada. And all of these, for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into every different province, but at the time of applying and at the time of knowing which is a core city or core area you want to do businesses, it would be advisable for you to check provincial specific regulations, regimes, etc. And this is not just for incorporation, this is also for your taxes, it's also for your operating licenses, it's also for various subsidies that you may fall under the specific province, to help you do better business. That is basically briefly the incorporation process.
Okay, so let's move, because I think there are 2 aspects that you brought around during this discussion. Was obviously the liability of the partner of the directors will not be limited, it will be non-limited. And the second thing is another concept that you, I think, was saying about, if you are a professional, you registered as a professional incorporation. Is it something different?
Well, the thing is that today, as in India, we're not required to register as an LLP or a partnership. You can be a individual counsel, you can practice on your own, you don't really require a shops and establishment license, all of that, right? However, in Canada, the thing is that because they want all professionals, everybody to be regulated and have certain advantages, they've created an incorporation status that gives you those advantages, gives you the benefits of being regulated, and gives you the benefit of having a corporate status without having to go into all your company compliances that you have. So, you won't normally we won't form a private limited company because of all the various other compliances that you have, but your professional incorporation will give you benefits of both sides.
Right, absolutely. So another thing, let's understand, because we had discussed earlier, we'll be taking on one province, that is Ontario, and
Yeah.
we'll be discussing about the legal structure and going on discussing the legal framework of incorporating a corporation there. Let's understand how it is like.
So, well, yeah, of course, Ontario follows the same principle that the rest of the federation does. Uh, it's just that Ontario also has specific other acts that would help you choose if you wish to incorporate here. So, for example, Ontario Electronic Commerce Act. So, if you were an e-commerce business, it would be advisable for you to incorporate federally or provincially in Ontario, and then make use of all the features under the act that you get. So, for example, it contains a limited error correction mechanism, establishes rules for substituting electronic functional equivalents. It has a trade-off for using certain electronic documents. The use of electronic documents by the government is a lot higher. Apart from that, just if you see the kind of business environment that Ontario has created for e-commerce companies, it is so suited and so advantageous that the top 10 types of products ordered in 2010 in Canada were 90% all done from Ontario. So everything from your gaming, from your merchandising, from your DVDs, VCDs. So it's basically for every specific province, the government incorporates certain acts, certain subsidies, certain programs that you can avail of. And this is what has an added benefit at the time of choosing your province of incorporation.
So another thing that is a concern for all like businesses is how is it taxation regime in Canada looks like?
Okay, so actually tax is one of the most favorable regimes that there is existing all over the world. And this is actually one of the biggest part of the attraction of doing business with Canada. So its present regime is so business competitive that they keep constantly make reductions in the provincial corporate income tax rate, combined with a low federal tax rate, which allows businesses to enjoy one of the lowest corporate income tax rates globally. Small businesses benefit from programs that provide increased access to capital and tax credits, reducing and streamlining red tape. For example, in Ontario, small businesses benefit from a low company income tax rate of 4.5%, and sales tax administration have saved Ontario businesses $365 million annually in compliance costs. So if you see, it's just a significant amount that you reduce just because of the way they have structured their tax regimes and the different programs that you can avail under, that it actually makes a lot of sense to have a business headquartered in Canada, thereafter doing business with the rest of the world, just because of the access that it has and your low tax. Now, a partnership, unlike a corporation, is not a separate legal entity for income tax purposes and is not subject to income tax. That you may set up is subject to Canadian tax and corporate laws and to certain licensing and registration requirements. Operating through a subsidiary provides you more independence and greater certainty regarding the amount of the non-resident income that will be subject to tax in Canada. E-commerce platforms are now widely used for doing businesses, but they will be taxed under your regular company tax rate that there is. If there's a certain subsidy that you can avail under, then you will get that rebate. But otherwise, it's subject to the same 4.5% income tax slab that they have for corporates.
Yeah. So I got that. Let's understand how is it beneficial for startups looks like how is there any special benefits?
Well, one of the greatest things that they have, and this is the only country that has it, is a startup visa. So this is a first of its kind measure. Canada does not provide temporary or conditional status. or any successful applicant to this program will be able to immediately apply for permanent residency if they secure a commitment from a designated Canadian private sector organization. These designated organizations should be a Canadian angel investment group, of VC fund, or a business incubator. You will be required to prove your business is supported by a designated organization, show your business meets the ownership requirements, meets the language requirements, and bring sufficient settlement funds. So if you say that my business is solely dependent on getting funds when I'm in Canada, you will not be eligible. You have to have some kind of skin in the game. That's how they like to call it. That if you're not going to bring enough investment, we don't know if you can actually support yourself while you are here. And your permanent residency is kind of dependent on that. Now, excuse me, apart from that, there are so many various programs that assist startups. So some of these are the government-supported ones are the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentives, the Venture Capital Action Plan, the Canadian Technology Accelerator Program. Now, Startup Visa I've told you about. The top, some of the, apart from this, some of the major areas that they've done work in is skill development. So I already spoke to you about skill development. A lot of the measures are aimed towards not just helping startups in Canada, but also helping startups from outside Canada set up business in India. Now, if you were to look at all the information that we've discussed today, and you were to put that into the startup sector and why it's beneficial, your income tax rates are absolutely minimum. The number of rebates and subsidies offered to startups are so many that you are spoiled for choice as to which one I should apply under. Now, apart from that, setting up the business is low cost, as well as reduced time. It takes about 5 days to set up a company from the get-go to the finish. All your administrative costs, all your administrative resources are well taken care of. The Canadian population is highly skilled. The schools there provide such a great education that the employees working in your company are of a certain quality. And not just that, especially if you are going from India to Canada, you don't have to stress too much about will I get an immigration visa, or will I get a visa to even start my company? Will I be able to have directors? There are enough and more trade facilitators that exist between the companies, like the Indo-Canadian Business Chamber, like the Canadian Indo-Business Chamber, trade commissions of every province, and they all have extremely helpful websites with all the resources and information there. Now, and not only that, they are happy to meet with you. So they're already existing in 8 different cities all over our country, where you can approach them, set up a meeting, tell them what sector you would like to work with. They not only cull out all the information relevant to how you can start up, but will also facilitate regional companies that you can speak with, work with, align with, form cooperative partnerships with, or individuals that you can associate with to incorporate your company. Now, this is on the vendor perspective as well as on the director perspective, because one of the requirements that is there is 25% of the company should have some kind of Canadian representation. Now, these facilitation bodies actually help you identify and thereafter cement the relationship with appropriate people there. Apart from this, there is key studies that are done in every sector that you can avail of to understand whether you should even set up a company there, whether you should go in as a branch office, whether you should first form a joint venture. If you were to form the joint venture, what would be the most favorable terms, conditions, areas, provinces for those? whether those companies have a presence in India already, whether you can approach them here in India, how to minimize your costs, how to minimize your human resources costs, everything from your legal, tax, compliances, across various pay structures, who you can approach, how to. So for startups, one of the biggest things is that reduced first time costs. That's your main concern. You don't want to have too many costs when you are just wanting to set up business somewhere else. So that's taken care of. Your taxes are minimum. That's taken care of. Your resources are available to you. That's taken care of. You have an insane number of programs that you can avail under. So there is no reason for a startup from India or from Canada or anywhere else to set up a business in Canada, or vice versa.
Because you're talking about cost, how much, what will be the government fees and typical attorney fees that will be involved? You can just give an idea at the range.
Typical attorney fees are across different slabs. It's like how you have in India, you can hire a lawyer locally for as low a cost as 2,000, 3,000 rupees, and it can go up in lakhs, right? We're all aware of that. And the same system applies there. It's just that I find that it's slightly more organized and corporatized in the way that most firms, or at least good tier 2, even tier 1 firms, they will always take a deposit amount before they start off with the advice. Everything is done in a very clear, transparent, professional manner. Because everybody is regulated in turn, you won't really hear much about being taken advantage of. You have a very accessible legal system, and in fact for Indians, because there's such a synergy within Indian and Canadian laws and the way they've evolved under the common law system and then thereafter, that it's very easy for us to understand their legal compliances. It's very similar to what we have in India. In terms of cost, while the cost to actually register a company is absolutely minimal, it would be advisable that because they're constantly being updated, it's a good idea for you to check those costs at the time that you are wishing to incorporate, and also depending on the province, because these are all dynamic things.
Yeah, sure. So that is another question, a lot of people will have is, how is if for example, I am setting up, a lot of people do it, setting up their startups in Singapore and then having their operational office in India.
Right.
Right. How is it if we do it in that way, you set up incorporate the business in Canada and then start having the operations in India. In that case, will
a lot of people do that.
Okay.
We have a lot of clients who do that, who set up their main head office or holding company in Canada, usually in Ontario or in Vancouver if it's more creative company, because a lot more film production, a lot more art, all of that comes out of Vancouver. So the BC government, which is the British Columbia province, is very very bullish, you can say, on any kind of film related incentives. So that's where you would set up if you wanted to do a production, if you wanted to do, say, digital media, or if you wanted to do another business or technology related business, then Ontario is usually the preferred destination. So a lot of them, what they do is they have a director in Canada, they have a team in Canada, they have their office set up in Canada, and they spend only a minimum amount of time there. So, to regulate, to make sure that everything's going according to plan, but actually operate out of Bombay and send business or do their business or execute their business out of Canada.
Okay. That's a good thing I can think of. Another thing is if we have to for example, an Indian company already there, now they just want to expand their business in Canada in form of do they need to actually incorporate a company, or they can operate as a
branch office? You can have a branch office.
operate as a
Branch
branch.
office, liaison office, yeah. You could enter a joint venture with somebody so that you don't have to even worry about the branch office, tax requirements, etc., or the administrative functions. You just have a joint venture where your Canadian partner will perform all the things that you require from India. And then they'll also, because they are local, they'll also be able to get or avail of a lot more incentives and programs that are for Canadian companies only.
Sure.
And this especially applies for when you're doing film production. So when you're doing film production, depending on the location you choose, the number of people you hire off Canada, the number of remote locations that you show through your movie, the number of days you've shot, the number of skills you've utilized, if you've utilized their labs, if you've utilized their creative talent, their schools, all of these will help you attract a different kind of subsidy or a different kind of incentive or a different program you can apply under. And these get further accelerated if you have a Canadian company as your joint venture partner there. So, all of these various things, all these measures exist. You should get good counsel so that your counsel is aware of all these measures and can structure your setting up of your business in a manner that you can avail of all of these in the most optimum way.
Yeah. So I think more or less we have covered the most of the part that we had discussed. If you can just if you have missed out on something that you can add on to our discussion, or like to have your say on something on that issue.
Yeah. Actually, what I can do is, because this is a startup specific session, I can tell you a little two lines on some of the programs that I had discussed for startups, like the Canadian Technology Accelerator, the Scientific Research Program, etc. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that will be helpful. That will be extremely helpful.
So generally, for you to be able to apply under the Canadian Technology Accelerator Program, which basically helps outstanding and high potential incubator and accelerator organizations in Canada expand their support to various entrepreneurs. So you will be eligible under the CTA if you are considered to have a product ready for market, differentiated technology, traction in the marketplace, have potential to scale, and can demonstrate the qualifications of your management team. These are your key requirements. Now, potential to scale, what does this mean? This means that you have actually identified your business growth objectives and you are ready to launch globally, or you have a credible team to execute it in the first place, minimum viable program to deliver to a sizable market, whether you have a good understanding of the various growth financing mechanisms, and that you could move your business to the next point by connecting with potential partners, funders, or potential customers in your chosen CTA location. So all of these are your basic things. Now, differentiated technologies means that you have a clear vision and value proposition for your business, a competitive landscape, and you're prepared to pitch it. Now, traction means that you have demonstrated proof of concept and or the IP protection. You can demonstrate, say, for example, through existing sales, quantify your user or customer pool in Canada or the US or any other country enough to prove to the companies that are giving you the technology instead that their technology would have some kind of return on investment. Okay, then just a second. Okay, so whether you have previously received any funding, whether it's from the public sector, private sector, friends, family, etc., whether you have in Canada partners who have done due diligence on your technology and company and are supporting your application. You need to be able to highlight your past experience and qualifications of your management team and be able to get to and from the CTA and cover your living expenses while you're in that particular market province. So this is about the CTA, how to avail. Now, the other thing is, one of the key source of financing and comprehensive strategy to increase private sector investment in innovative businesses is through the Venture Action Plan. Now, the Government of Canada has also invested an aggregate of about 350 million Canadian dollars in 4 high-performing funds. These investments are helping innovative businesses access the capital they need to grow and create jobs. Now, this program was announced only in 2013, so we still don't have a very big idea or precedence of what all or what the success rate under this has been. But it's definitely one of those measures that you want to encourage and you want to applaud and you want to wait and watch and see how far it could really go with the cooperation of the private and the public sector working so well together and so smoothly together. And the intention behind it is to basically promote as many startups as they possibly can, because under some of the specific ones, like for example, the scientific research and experiment development one, it's more technical. But under the venture action plan, any and all businesses can apply as long as you meet these eligibility criteria. Now, one of the best known tax credits offered in Canada is this Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program tax credit. So if your work involves scientific or technology advancement and the development of technical content, you may be eligible for this. For eligible projects, the federal government provides refundable tax credits of 15 to 35% of the eligible costs, including salaries, contractor fees, and all your materials. So this gives you a very strong competitive advantage over other companies that may not be eligible under this program. Then, in addition, under the I'm drawing a parallel to Ontario over here. Under the parallel Ontario Innovation Tax Credit, eligible corporations can claim a 10% refundable tax credit for qualified expenditure on scientific research and experimental development performed in Ontario, on top of the 15 to 20 or 15 to 35% already being offered by the federal government under the tax credit system. So, you know, just if you see all these various different measures and you combine them, you can understand how much of a tax credit you're getting by. So already your company income tax rate is at 4.5%. On top of that, if you are a scientific research company involved in any of these activities, you are getting a 35% by the federal government. Now, if you were to additionally incorporate yourself in Ontario, you will get an additional 10% on top of that. So your tax credit systems and your tax is so low that the cost of doing business over there is absolutely brilliant. So these are just, I don't want to go into too much detail because then it's very difficult to comprehend it. But just briefly, to give you an idea, these are all the various ways in which your business can benefit. And because Canada has such a small population, they're keen on more and more skilled, quality people coming in and setting up business.